What's going on YouTube? It is Texans Take over here, back with another video. In today's video, we have my Houston Texans 2026 NFL Draft reactions. We took Keelin Rutledge at pick 26, Aiden McDonald at pick 36, Marlon Klein at pick 59, Fabeti Wiiwoo at 106, Widz at 123, Kamari Ramsey at 141, Lewis Bond at 204, and then ended off with Aiden Fischer out of Indiana at 243. But we're going to give my initial thoughts about each prospect that's going to be joining this team um, now. So we're going to start off with our first round pick, Mr. Keelin Rutledge, who we got at pick 26. So the pros that I had for him was that he was a powerful mauler in the run block game with heavy hands and a strong play strength. He has a really, really good anchor, really finishes plays. He's got an elite mentality. He's going to work his tail off for you. Reminds me a lot of White Teller, who the Texans just went and got. So I think, him learning behind White Teller could be one of the best things for him. I think he'll start at center initially and then move outside to guard. But he's got good athleticism, the most athletic guard in this class in terms of RAS scores. I think his was in the 9.3s. So really, really good athlete. He was mad at a 5.05 40 at 6'4", 313. So you can tell that he's a quick dude. He's able to pull. He's able to do a lot of different things. If he learns how to snap the ball, I expect him to play center for us. But a really good player gets to the second level. Usually, some people say that his issue is not getting to the second level, but it's because he's driving defensive tackles back to the second level. Really good player. Um, gonna be a swarm guy on the offense, something that the offense didn't really have, but Keelin Rutledge is definitely going to instill that. Um, he's got production, didn't allow a sack last season. He was a multi-year starter, transferred to Georgia Tech, was a leader. Wasn't a captain, but he was a leader. He was very respected by the offensive line unit, the entire offensive unit. They described Keelin Rutledge as a leader. So a lot of pros with Keelin Rutledge. A reason we moved up to go get him. The 49ers wanted him, the Titans wanted him, the Ravens wanted him. Texans didn't want what happened with Donovan Jackson and not Josh Simmons, Donovan Jackson, Tyler Booker to happen in this draft again. So they went out and got their guy, and they got Keelin Rutledge, a guard who I think is going to play center at the start of his career. If he's an all-pro center, you keep him at center. If he's not, then you move him back outside to guard and you go get your center. But a really good player. Um, gonna have a really, really high floor. He's such a good player. He's gonna finish. He's an intense physical bruiser that isn't really seen in the NFL too much anymore. But Wyatt Teller is one that reminds me of that exact mold, and Keelan Rutledge is another. So you have two of them on the offensive line. Then you have Ed Ingram on the other interior portion of the offensive line. Then you got Brendan Smith, another physical guy, and Arion Terracery, just a big, big dude. So yeah, Keelan Rutledge, a really good player. Those are the pros there. Good athleticism, powerful, high motor guy, physical finisher. Finish is the key word. He finishes plays by, playing until the whistle, playing after the whistle, to be honest. And that production there with that allowing a sack at Georgia Tech this year was also very impressive in my opinion. The cons with him though, he has inconsistent work or footwork in pass protection. And so if you get a speed 3 tech, it leads to some vulnerabilities there. But Peter Woods wasn't able to have his way with him. He was a speedy 3 tech, had a little bit of a down year though, so um, have to watch some more film against smaller 3 techs for Keelan Rutledge. But he didn't really seem to fare too poorly against it. It was just his anchor would have to be used a little bit more than just being able to maul them. So he'd get dragged back about 2 yards, but then finally recover because of how strong his anchor is. And maybe that's just his tendency. Um, but you know, I would like him to just have that anchor, but be able to just absolutely maul. Still in the pass game too, which he is, um, you know, fully capable of doing. Balance and body control can get sloppy in space. Obviously, he's just a big dude with some speed, so it's hard to control all that mass at that speed. But if he figures out how to control that, then you've got one of the best pullers in the game, and then you've got someone that can recover for your tackles as well. If he's got no one on him, he can drop back and help the tackles. But yeah, it's really not that big of a deal because it's in space. You don't really see the Texans pull all too much. We'll see what Kaylee decides to do, but if he gets that control under him, then he's an excellent, excellent puller. And then pad level and reaction timing need refinement. Pad level's a little bit high at times, in my opinion, when I was watching him, just because he relies on that anchor. Sometimes your shoulders kind of, when you fix your posture and you kind of roll your shoulders back, that's what he tends to do with his anchor. Um, and then, I would expect it to be fixed considering he's potentially playing center, but reaction timing. Maybe that first step needed to be a little quicker at times, but something that's a quick fix. Um, you know, I think he'll be the one if he's at guard swinging his arm to start the play. And if not, he's at center and he knows exactly when the play's starting because he's the one snapping the ball. So quick fix for him. But those are just the pros and cons I had for Keelin Rutledge. And then we move on to Caden McDonald. Um, Smaller list, but pros: strong run defender, anchors well and clogs interior lanes. This is going to be a two gap guy. So you're going to have the A and B gap covered with Caden McDonald. Then you have Will Anderson or Daniil opposite of him, and it's just absolutely going to wreak havoc. Um, I had a concern with him going into the draft process that I didn't like the schematic fit, but then D'Amico comes out and says he likes Caden. He's a high character guy, and he realized that some of the best teams do have, he has a preference with these three techs, but they do have one techs that are able to just stop the run, and that's their only job, and that's what they're going to do with Caden McDonald. So I completely understand that. I just thought D'Amico would really only look at three techs, and that's why Peter Woods was a potential fit for me. Um, but we go out and get Caden McDonald at pick 36, moving up two spots with the Raiders. He's got good size and a strength profile for early down roll. I think he's just going to be predominantly in there to stop the run. He doesn't have that pass rush upside, which is in the cons list there. He's not an interior penetrator like some players are. Like Dexter Lawrence is incredible at doing that. I think Peter Woods is going to be good at doing that in the NFL as well, but um, had 3 or 4 sacks this past year at Ohio State, so it's not like he didn't get to the pass rusher, but a lot of those were just due to the edges doing their job and then the quarterback stepping up in the pocket and Kid McDonald being there. And I think he can do that for Houston, just being a nuisance, being there, taking up 2 gaps so the edge rushers have space um, to go work their bags, and then he's there to just clean it all up. Um, and then he lacks elite burst and closing speed. Obviously, he's a big D tackle. You don't expect him to have the closing speed of a Peter Woods, but you would like there to be a little bit extra burst. Discipline, gap control, and physical presence inside, though, is another pro for him. This is probably going to be a lot shorter than Keelan Rutledge, but yeah, the gap control, he's really good at clogging up both A and B gaps instead of just you know losing what his job is. He sticks to his role. He sticks to it well, and he's going to be a great player in the NFL. He's going to do a lot of good things for the Texans. Um, this is probably our best pick of the draft in terms of value. You get Kaden McDonald, who I thought could have been a first round pick. I had him to the Bears at 25 quite often, but he falls to 36, and the Houston Texans are able to go up and get him. So easy A plus in my opinion for Kaden McDonald. A lot more pros, probably a couple more cons too there for Kaden McDonald, but these are the ones that just stood out in his film. Really good player at Ohio State. Really helped their interior defensive line. Really helped their D line like Caden Curry be productive as a whole as well. So. Really good player, Caden McDonald is. I'm excited to see what he does in Houston. I expect him to just clog up a lot of space, really stop the run well, um, and then allow Will and Daniil to really just get after it even more than they have been. So you could see 17 to 18 sacks for Will. You could see 15 sacks for Daniil just because of Caden McDonald there. Their ceiling rises by a couple sacks there. So I completely understand the pick. He's going to eat up space. I can see him even getting 4 to 5 sacks his rookie year too. He's going to be a really good player for this Texans defense and a really fun piece in the run game too. So I'm excited to see what Caden McDonald does. I was really happy with the pick. Um, I had Kristen Miller above him on my big board just because I thought he had more of a pass rush upside and he was more of a 3 tech than McDonald. But I mean, if they wanted a true 1 tech no tackle, then that's exactly what Caden McDonald does for you. They had interest in Big Citrus, so there's no reason to not have interest in McDonald if you have interest in Orange. So good player in Caden McDonald, one of the best in the draft in my opinion. I think NFL Stock Exchange had him in their top 15. So really good player Caden McDonald is. I'm really happy for the pick. Smash the first 2 out of the park. And then third one is Marlon Klein. This is going to be an interesting one to some people. A lot of people on my live stream, thank y'all so much for tuning in, by the way. We're at like 3,000 views on that live stream as a whole. But some people said, that this was a reach. We shouldn't have done this at all. We shouldn't have even drafted him. I don't think it's that we shouldn't have drafted him. I thought it was a little bit early, though. I'll agree with y'all on that facet. I thought we could have traded back. Caserio said we did have deals to move back, and they kind of just fell through. So that's why we just ended up going to get our guy Marlon Klein. I think if we moved back to the third round, we still would have got Marlon Klein there, to be honest. So there is that. A good tight end out of Michigan, good athlete, solid blocking foundation with upside and run game is one of the pros. He's a really, really good run blocker. That's what all Michigan tight ends, besides Colston Loveland, was the anomaly, seem to be good at doing. Colston Loveland was like a receiver at tight end. He's just an incredible player, though. I'm a big Michigan fan, so I watched a lot of Marlon Klein. He had consistent growth all every single year that he was in college. I was at the national championship game that he somewhat featured in. I don't think he played too much in, but featured in a little bit. Um, but this past year, he had some decent production. First year starting because obviously he was behind Colson Loveland, but really good traits, really good athleticism. 4.61, I believe, at 6'6", 250, and then 32.5-inch arms. So he's got good arm length. He was one on one versus tackles sometimes, or one on one as a tackle against edges sometimes, like against Texas in the bowl game. He was one on one as a or pretty much acting as a tackle. So we'll see what he does with the Texans, but this is a traditional Y tight end that's going to be. Probably our tight end two to start out, and then could eventually develop into our tight end one after a couple of years. But a really good player from Germany. 23 and a half will start his career at 24. So he's got probably 10 years at least of tight end production there with Marlon Klein because tight ends are able to last till they're like 34 or so. Um, even older sometimes even younger. But we'll see with Marlon Klein. He's got scheme versatility. He can be an inline guy. He can move around. He can be a slot receiver with the speed that he possesses. So intrigued to see what Marlon Klein offers to the Texans offense. My guess would be a wide tight end two, who's able to, unlock the seams, block well, and then be a guy in the flats that can run after the catch. He's still a raw player. He needs to, complete himself as a tight end. I thought he had first round upside as a prospect. When he put it all together. Like he looked like one of the most complete tight ends in this class when he put everything together. It was just inconsistent at times when he put it all together. I think it happened for one or two games when I really thought he flipped the switch and he turned it around, and then the next game was a little inconsistent. So yeah, he's raw. But if you had the tools there that he does, and you're able to turn that into that consistent production, he would have been a first round pick, in my opinion. Um, but he's a raw player. He goes in the second round. I think he could have gone in the third. Some people say early fourth. I would have said third for Marlon Klein. I had him at 89 on my big board. Um, Route running inconsistency as a pass catcher need growth. He's really good in the contested catch range. He's really good over the middle parts of the field, but he had a drop issue with Bryce Underwood putting balls where it was a little tough catch, but someone with good hands would make, or great hands, I guess, would make those catches. So. Um, he needs to develop some consistency there, but I would expect it to get better with CJ Stroud really not throwing rockets like Bryce Underwood was doing all of last season. So I guess we'll see, but decent route runner, but I think something that could be refined as well. And not yet a proven high volume receiving threat. That's because Colson Loveland was there, and then last year Michigan didn't really have a go-to guy other than Andrew Marsh. So they really relied on the run game with Justice Haynes, Jordan Marshall. And then the offensive line was in its best spot with Babaloa getting injured. Blake Frazier had a decent year. But a high end volume receiving threat is a little bit of a stretch for Klein. I thought he was one of their better receiving threats as a whole. Donovan McCauley, another one there too that was decent, but I would say Klein was probably their second best receiver other than Marsh. But just heavily reliant on the run game, especially with Sherrod Moore at the helm. Uh, just consistent run, punt for Michigan this past season. So I think if he stayed under Kyle Whittingham for a year, the narrative would have changed because I thought he would have got a lot more production. But he heads to the NFL. I think he can certainly develop as a receiver, though. And we move on to Fabeti Wiiwoo, guard slash center out of Oklahoma. He's got positional versatility, as you can see, guard center flexibility. He can even play tackle. I think he has 34.5-inch arms, so there's potential for him to slide out to right tackle, I guess, if you really want him to. But he's 6'4", 315, so I don't think he will. But just saying, with the arm length, it is a possibility too. If you really need a guy there, I guess let's say Braden Smith get hurt, Trent Brown gets hurt. You could flex Wee Woo out there if you don't want to put Blake Fisher there. If Blake Fisher's even part of this roster anymore. But he's got developmental upside with size and interior strength. He's got a decent anchor. But it does get challenged by the bull rush. I think it's when it's finesse moves, he's got a decent anchor to really just chop those hands, slide, and then reset. He's really good at doing that. So it's a decent anchor, but I think the bull rush is a little challenging for him. Maybe that's something he can work on, especially with going against Will and Daniil and Caden and Sheldon and Togia and Naquan and Logan Hall all in training camp. So I think he'll develop as an offensive lineman. But yeah, he adds depth across multiple offensive line spots, like we talked about, guard, center, right tackle, potentially too. But allowed 0 sacks this past season, only a 0.4% pressure rate. I think the number was 8 in like 700 snaps or something like that. So it was incredible numbers when you looked at his profiles and stuff like that. I need to watch him more to be honest, but he looked decent. Once I hopped off the live, I went to go get dinner, and then I started watching some film on him, just because I didn't watch him all too much. Um, but these are the things I picked out in about 2 games I watched of Oklahoma. It was the game against Alabama in the playoff, and then it was the game against. Ooh, I have to look up their schedule to remind myself, but I know it was a game against Alabama because that was their only one in the playoffs that I was intrigued at looking at. But maybe it was a game against Michigan. I think it was a game against Michigan because I wanted to see him against Rayshon Benny. That does check out. So yeah, it was a game against Michigan, and it was the game against Alabama in the playoffs. But he's a potential starter. He could potentially start at center if you want to move White Teller to guard. Sorry, I was blanking there because I was just trying to think really deep. But yeah, potential starter on the offensive line. At center, if Ed Ingram or White Teller get hurt, he could definitely slot in at center, and then you move Rutledge to guard, or he just slots in at guard and you keep Rutledge at center. Um, the cons I see is he hunches forward in pass pro, opening himself up to counters. This is more with the bull rush. It kind of ties in. These two are in tandem. Um, but like a lot of people said with Basantis, he reaches with his arms a little bit, um, just because the arm lengths are incredible for him. So like 34-inch arms, if he's going against an interior defensive lineman that has 32-inch arms, then you could absolutely just reach and you have that advantage there. But it tends to lead him to hunching over a little bit. So if it's a ghost move, then it's a little difficult for him to recover. He typically does though, because he's got decent athleticism. But it's just a potential issue in the NFL too, if teams are able to recognize that. But anchor a little shallow when challenged by bull rushers. I talked about this earlier. He gets dragged back a little bit, but uh, he does get that initial punch just because of how long those arms are. So I really like him as a prospect. With the games I've watched so far, obviously we need to dive in deeper on him. It's only been 2 games that I've watched, but looks decent, and I can understand why the Texans selected him. I know some people in the Texans stratosphere on Twitter were also high on him too. So Fabeti Wiiwoo out of Oklahoma to the Texans at 106. Moving on, though, we got Wade Widz, linebacker out of Clemson. This is a guy that I was really high on throughout the draft process. I really liked him. Um, and I have a lot of pros here with him. He's got high end athleticism, runs in the 4.5s, and he covers sideline to sideline effectively. He's a strong coverage linebacker. He can match tight ends and running backs. So you think of third downs when you can't really rely on Henry To'oTo'o as a coverage guy. Put Wade Widz in, and he'll be able to do a solid role for you. Or if EJ Speed gets hurt, he can play Will. If To'oTo'o gets hurt, he can play Sam. Even if Aziz gets hurt, he can play the Mike. He was the communicator for Clemson. So he was their signal caller at Clemson. Or I don't know. I believe he was a captain. Excuse me. He was a captain. So he's a leader at the end of the day. He was productive, over 200 tackles. And made plays defensively with interceptions, forced fumbles, tackles for loss. You can use him in a blitz game. It's not like that's his best. He's best as a coverage guy. But he's an easy heir to Henry To'oTo'o. Especially improvements in the pass game would be there with Wade Widz. So I'm happy with the pick. I really like him as a prospect. Got him at 123 after moving down with the Chargers. I think the Texans could have considered him at 117. But a really, really good athlete. You think of a guy that can go side to side and really match, those Texas routes, those out routes, those seams, those wheels, those flats. What else could there be? Zigs, drags, crossers. He can do it all. He's going to be a highly productive player in the pass game for the Texans next season, in my opinion. I think he'll find the field a lot, and I think his role is going to increase throughout the course of the season because I think the Texans will start to trust him a little bit more. Um, he's a little over aggressive. I don't know if that's a con or a pro. Sometimes you can see him flow a little too fast, and then running backs are able to cut back and then burst with that hole that he created by going too fast. But like sometimes the over aggressiveness leads him to be in the backfield and make a tackle for loss. So it's why he's a productive tackler is that over aggressive play style. But sometimes it leads to the demise. So it can be definitely coached up where you just teach him, hey, we want you to just stick to this gap, be patient at this gap because we know these dudes are going to do this, so don't try to do too much. Um, he struggles at shedding blocks against bigger linemen. I noticed this against Georgia Tech actually with Keelin Rutledge when he was able to get to the second level. Widz was struggling there. Um, just to kind of shed and move. Once Rutledge handled his dinner with Peter Woods, which he did that entire game, he was able to just get on Widz, and Widz wasn't really able to lock peak or shed. He was just kind of finding himself to get dragged back at times, but um, tackling consistency issues at times, especially versus power. You notice this because of the over aggressiveness, the cutbacks, and then he finds himself flat footed at times because of how over aggressive he is. He kind of has to stop and turn, and then if there's a power back, like I know Haynes King isn't a power back; he's a quarterback, but he's a really really good runner in college football. He had his way with Widz at sometimes just being able to get like 1 or 2 extra yards, but Widz is a pretty secure tackler. Um, I think him going against Demont in training camp will really help his development, but a good player in my opinion. And I think could find out a starting role after, one season. Maybe he finds it halfway through this first season though. And we'll see what is in store for Wade Wood. Has a lot of pros there. And then some small cons that I think could definitely be teached um, or taught, excuse me. But moving on to one of the best picks in our draft, and Kamari Ramsey, the safety out of USC. The pros are that he's versatile. Played nickel this past season at USC, but then played free and strong the seasons prior for USC, so he can move across the board for them. For the Texans, he can back up Petrie, he can back up Bullock, he can back up Blankenship. Whatever you don't want Jaden or Jalen Reed to do at safety, you can have Kamari Ramsey do. And then, if Petrie gets hurt, you can definitely just slot him into the nickel, and I think he can be highly productive there because he's got really good coverage ability, really good footwork. He's rangy, got decent athleticism. It's not his best role or best attribute, but got really good movement skills, just being able to fly around the field and be where the ball is. He knows where the ball is. He's got a knack for the football. So, he's going to be very flexible in sub packages when you want a slot corner. If you don't want Petrie in there, you can put Ramsey in there. And I think he's going to be, a very, very valuable piece to this defense his rookie year and then onwards, because if Petrie gets hurt, you don't really have anyone other than Kamari Ramsey. If Bullock gets hurt, then you have Jalen Reed or Kamari Ramsey. If Blankenship gets hurt, then you have Kamari Ramsey or Jalen Reed. So it's whatever you prefer. But I think Kamari Ramsey is going to be somewhat productive in the NFL because I think he has a decent profile. Um, it's not the best, it's not elite, and it doesn't really help him in run support, but he is a physical dude. He's not scared to come downhill and hit. Um, I think one of the cons is that he's role specific early in his career, so maybe he doesn't use that safety nickel flexibility to start out. Maybe he's just a nickel to start out and then he develops into a safety as well. But I think, early on, he just needs to learn one position. He was best in 2024, I think, when he was a strong safety kind of rolling into the box rather than a true nickel. So we'll see what the Texans use him as. But, I think he's a good player. Could have gone in day two, goes in day three. And we'll see what he has in store for us, but I think he's a decent player, really good value for the Texans there too. And then we move on to Lewis Bond out of Boston College. He was uberly productive, had 1,000 yards for Boston College on 88 receptions. Only found the end zone once, and that was against Louisville, but had like 90 yards against Notre Dame, 70 against Clemson, I think like 170 or 130 against Syracuse, and then 130 against Fordham. So uberly productive, was truly just their number one guy, their leading target. Um, and it wasn't like he didn't produce. I think his lowest game was that 42 yards against Louisville, but he found the end zone. So I mean, he was consistent in production throughout the course of the year. He's a reliable target with good ball security. He's going to be able to catch it over the intermediate parts of the field for 5, 10 yard gains, whatever you want it to be. He's going to be able to do it. He's not the explosive athlete. The RAS score shows that too. 40 time was a little bit low. There's some explosiveness there with the 10-yard split, but that's really important for just catching the ball on the underneath parts of the field, which I think he's going to be able to do. Um, but yeah, the athletic concerns are there. He's not going to be a vertical threat, and his ceiling is probably a wide receiver three as a slot guy in the NFL. I don't know if that's with the Texans. I think that's Jalen Knowles' spot to lose. But we'll see what Lewis Bond becomes into. I think he could be like a 20 catch for 150 yards guy, as I said yesterday, for the Texans this next season, and then like a touchdown or two maybe in there, scattered around. But he could be that Hutch guy for the slot. Hutch is that X or X or Z, receiver that comes in for Hig or no or comes in for Hig or Collins, and then I think Bond could be the guy that comes in for Noel. So, I mean, we'll see at the end of the day, but I think he could be somewhat productive as a backup receiver for the Texans. So I don't mind the pick at all. But we'll move on to our last pick in the draft. Aiden Fischer, going to be a special teamer, but he was a linebacker at Indiana. Another leader who wore the green dot for them. He's got high football IQ. He's got really good instincts, and a leader, obviously, for wearing the green dot for Indiana. You got to be a leader in some capacity. Really good effort player. Good tackling fundamentals. So exactly, I think he could be a very good special teamer in my opinion. I think that's what the pick went in for. Um, doesn't have the best frame. Doesn't have the athleticism. And I think he'll be a rotational linebacker at most. He could play will potentially, but you don't really want him being that Mike where he's doing a lot of the dirty hitting and stuff like that because he's just not the biggest. 6'1", 235, I believe, for Aiden Fisher. So it's not like he's uberly small like Kyle Lewis, but I mean, it's not true linebacker size in my opinion. But not the best coverage guy. You like him more in the run game than the pass game. And then the athleticism, again, is a little bit of a concern. If you compare him to Wade Widz, who I think could be a starter in the NFL, the athleticism's night and day there. So yeah, I think he's a special teamer, but he could develop as a rotational linebacker as well as a depth piece. But I think he'll start out as a special teamer early in his career, and I think he could be a very good special teamer at that. So he's going to be a valuable player, just not as a true linebacker, probably as a special teamer to start out. And then if he carves out a role in the defense, he definitely can. He's got the tenacity, the drive, I think, in my opinion. So we'll see what he does in the NFL, but I believe he starts out as a special teamer. So I'm going to keep that one short and sweet because it's the seventh round pick. And, I don't think there's a lot of cons for a special teamer at the end of the day. But we'll end it there. Let me know what y'all think about this draft class down in the comment section below. I was ecstatic with it, the first two, and then I really like Widz. I liked Klein as a prospect, maybe not that early. I really like Kamari Ramsey though, and then I thought Lewis Bond could be somewhat productive for this Texans team. But let me know what y'all think down below. And it's always Texans Takeover, and I'm out. Thanks for all the support throughout the past weekend. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully the support continues on this video, but let me know what y'all think again. And it's Texans Takeover, and I'm out. Peace.